Well, really, even in Ziegfeld Girl, that whole scene with her father and everything, she's really supposed to be Lana's age, but she doesn't look it. It's almost like they can't get out of that thing of keeping her this like young singing girl or something, right? I mean, that was her thing, that she was like this young.
More important to MGM in those days, probably starting with Mr. Mayer, was yes, we'll let her play this character, but it's Judy Garland playing the character. It's not the character going to be trying to be, Judy Garland trying to be somebody else. That's what people went to see. MGM figured that's who they went to see. And Joan Crawford, that's who they're going to go see. Greta Garbo, that's who they're going to go see. Don't change it.
Of all of the young people that you were involved with when you were all, say, in your late teens at MGM, was Mickey Rooney different because he was wilder, or wasn't he really? I mean, are the stories about him being wild true, or was he pretty much just like everybody else?
I didn't find Mickey wild. I found he was funny all the time. He enjoyed entertaining all of us on a set all the time. I'm talking about 13, 14, 15 years old now. I didn't go to the MGM school with those kids. My mother wanted me to play with the kids in the block and not the professional kids, and be as ordinary as I could be. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because those kids grew up only knowing other professional kids like themselves, and not what life then was really all about. And expecting a little too much then when things started to go downhill, they weren't prepared to handle it at all. And I saw much more of a variety of life growing up with the kids in the block, especially at 12, 14, 15, 16 years old.
Right. But
So
when
Mickey was, I never hung around with him. I worked with him a few times. I bumped into him here and there. Still to this day, I'll bump into him at a racetrack or something. And he's really not very much different. Just as loud, just as crazy.
But he had so much money at that point, his reputation. When we were doing the research on Peter Lawford, they said Peter Lawford had just come to town. He was living in a little rundown bungalow with his mother, and he'd have to take the bus. And the stop was right at where Mickey Rooney's estate poured out. And he would hide behind the bench because he could hear that car that he drove coming down the road, and he was embarrassed. He didn't want him to see him standing there waiting for the bus. So, I mean, at one time, I got the impression that Mickey really, he was the big money maker, that he was really kind of running roughshod. He could pretty much do what he wanted to do. But I don't know whether that's true or not, and I didn't know whether you had ever witnessed that.
I don't know. I've just heard that by the time he was able to legally spend the money himself and not have it in his parents' hands, that he spent quite a bit. That's all I've heard. But you hear what you hear is exaggerated.
Would you repeat the story that you were telling me inside about how much money you were making, and how they used to say that when you got hair on your legs, Mr. Mayer would get rid of you? And can you explain that to me, about how you were making $2,000 a week, Mickey was making what, $150, and how it was so very cold? Because we have a great story about I think it's Lana, who had this guy pick her up and go over to clean out her dressing room, and how nobody even said goodbye. I mean, she had been there for 18 years. Nobody even came out and said, well, it's been great,
Mm-hmm.
When they want you, they want you. When they don't want you, it's... Can
That's
you
right.
talk to
Well, as my mother felt it coming on, and in very, I don't want to say casual, but intelligent ways, my mother would let me know that as I was getting older, it wasn't going to last too long there at MGM, and who knows where else, because what were pictures doing with teenagers? They weren't doing anything with teenagers. Well, maybe it's because this show with teenagers in New York called Dead End was a hit, and kids were starring in it, that MGM very quickly was making a picture called The Devil is a Sissy. And two of the dead-end type kids in it were Jackie Cooper and Mickey Rooney. And a few blocks away in the richer part of the neighborhood was a kid played by Freddie Bartholomew. And I was there in my 6th year. An option was due to go into the 7th year, and they don't have to pick it up. And as I've always said, I was getting hair on the legs, and they didn't know what to do with the kid at that age. You know, hair under the arms and hair on the legs, and what are we going to do? And you can't try to make you play 11, 12 years old anymore. And I was dropped. Now, at that point, the contract had gotten up to $2,000 a week. And Mickey was a contract player there. Had been there, I don't know, a year or more. That time he was getting $150. So they didn't drop Mickey, even though he was 2 years older. He was shorter. And they could always have him play a busboy or bellboy or something, you know, which is what he did mostly until after this movie, when it came out. They didn't really think it was going to be such a hit, I guess, but it was, and it made a lot of noise. And it was very good. So Mickey's the kid that they owned, and they didn't. So they immediately, without his family asking, they gave him more money, they changed his contract, and they started to use him very well. And next thing you knew, it was the Andy Hardy pictures and things like that.